So this is a bit of a technical experiment within this thing. All right, yeah. So I'm Kevin. I'm the CTO at Kitemaker, as we just mentioned. I'm based in Norway, so I'm very much not in New York. It's a little after midnight here, so this is a pretty interesting experience to be talking to a bunch of people I can't really see at the moment. A little after midnight, but we'll give it a go. I live in Oslo with a small army of red-headed Vikings you see in the bottom corner there. Before I started Kitemaker, I did a bunch of other things. I worked with WebRTC for a while. I built a Firefox OS phone, which most people cannot say. No one bought it, but I built it. And back in the day, I was a C++ programmer. I worked on the Qt framework for anyone who's done any C++ development. I'm going to start with a demo because I want to give people an idea of what is possible with Slate, and then work my way backwards to how that was, how it was built. So shameless self-promotion time. This is Kitemaker. This is the issue tracker I'm working on. We built this thing because basically we hated using all the issue trackers that were out there. They didn't work very well for our needs. They're kind of slow, clunky, not very much fun to use. And they didn't work the way we wanted to work as a remote team working asynchronously. So we made it really fast and nice to use, first of all, like lots of hotkeys for assigning and labeling and whatever, the typical kind of command palette to do stuff. So that kind of gets over the clunkiness factor and makes it nice to use. But what we really spent a lot of time on was making the issues really rich documents, because we think that's a really important way for teams, especially remote teams, to work together, to write lots of stuff down, to work together on discussing what to build, how to build it, work through their problems together in these issues. And so we built this issue screen with SlateJS that I'm talking about today. And it can do all the things you would want from a nice editor, right? We've got like, you can hit slash and figure out all the stuff you want to insert, like Figma designs and code blocks with syntax highlighting and all that kind of jazz. And it's got, the markdown shortcuts that you'd want and all that kind of thing. And it's all built with Slate. It works really nicely, I think. And it's we're finding that teams really do put a lot of content into these issues once they get kind of a nice editor to work with. So let's talk a bit about how we built that thing and what Slate really is. So Slate's a framework for building rich text editors. It's basically three pieces. One is a document format, like the JSON blob that represents what a document is. It's some ways to hook in React code to render that document. So basically to say, what does a headline look like, or what does an image look like, or what does a code block look like? A way to hook in some React components and actually render the stuff. And then basically it's a way to handle input from the user and various API calls. So what's going to happen when the user types these things? Why did it turn into a headline when I typed pound and then a space? This kind of stuff. Some might ask, do we need a framework for this? Not everyone uses one. Some people roll their own. You've got good old-fashioned content editable divs. You can listen for all the events that happen in JavaScript land and try to maintain some state in React and keep these things in sync with one another and basically roll your own. And I think some larger companies at least have done this. I wouldn't really recommend it if you're not a huge development team though. Content editable, for one, is notoriously flaky across browsers and across platforms. It behaves differently everywhere. So let someone else handle that nightmare for you. And a lot of the work you'd be doing to keep state in sync from the DOM and the data in React, you'd basically end up rolling your own version of SlateJS anyway. So just pick a framework. It doesn't have to be Slate, but I wouldn't go down the road of rolling it yourself if you can avoid it. Why did we pick Slate of all the things out there? There's a lot of choices in this area. There's Quill.js, there's Tricks that was made by the guys who make Basecamp, CK Editor, a bunch of other tools. Why did we pick Slate of all of these? The most important thing is the first one here, and that is it's got very little opinions about anything, basically. It doesn't care what your documents look like. It doesn't care what you put into them, if it's headlines or images or code or Figma designs or whatever. It does not care. It doesn't have any built-in visual stuff. There's no toolbars that come along with it and these kind of things. And that was important for us because we wanted it to look exactly like we wanted it to look. It doesn't even do undo and redo by default, actually. Like it does nothing out of the box. Was that a question or forgot to mute? There we go. Yeah, so it does nothing out of the box, basically. It's the people who made it with React in mind from the beginning. So it's really easy to just hook into it if you're a React developer and get going. It's got the basic building blocks for collaborative editing, meaning two people editing the same document or two or more people editing the same document at the same time. So it's got these kind of primitives that you can send over the wire and keep documents up to date. It doesn't have all the functionality you need for that, but it's got the primitives. And it's got a really vibrant community. You can go onto Slack and you can ask questions and people are super helpful and nice. So all those things together made us pick it. Showing a little bit about how Slate, this, as I said, one of the parts of it is kind of how does it represent a document? And the answer is it's really simple, actually. It takes a lot of inspiration from the DOM, which is not a bad thing in this case. So it sort of treats everything as a bunch of nodes that form a tree, basically. The top level node, they call it editor. Below that are these top level blocks. And these are the things that are kind of specific to your domain. That's where you put your code blocks and your lists and your images and all of those kind of things. It has inline elements, just like HTML does in general. And that's for things like links and things that should flow inside the text. And it has something it calls marks, which are used for styling stuff, making things bold and making things italic. And if you look over on the right at the JSON blob that's there, you can see that it pretty much reflects what's on the left. It's got two top level paragraphs. They've got some children that are either text nodes with some styling or maybe a link node. And that's about it. It's pretty simple. You can read it, you can generate it outside of Slate and pass it in. It's understandable. And that just forms a tree. So if you have like a list with lists under it and those kind of things, you'll just get deeper nested trees in your JSON blob. But it's still pretty simple and pretty easy to understand. It makes it really nice to
jump in for a
yeah,
second.
please.
Is this a rigidly defined schema or is it extendable for different use cases?
Good question. It is the opposite of rigidly defined schema. It is as flexible, I think, as it can be. So the only requirement is the top level thing is an array of these objects. And these objects have a children property if they're blocks. And those children must either be other blocks or they must be some mixture of text and inline things like links. And that's it. So like, if you look at the JSON on the right where I say type paragraph, that's actually just my own stuff. Slate doesn't care about it at all. Where I say URL on the link or I say bold on the text, Slate doesn't care about any of that stuff. Like literally only the children property and the text property are the things it cares about. Everything else is up to me, up to the developer. So it's super flexible.
Awesome, thank you.
No worries. This is a whole editor in Slate. So this is how you get started with Slate. Basically, if you the first line of this React component is just creating an editor with the create editor command. It's using use memo and some stuff, but don't worry about that. Basically, you need to create an editor. You need to store this object that we just looked at on the previous screen. This array of nodes that is your document. In this case, it's a single thing with some text in it. It says testing. That's it. So that's the document that'll get updated as you type. Down on line 15, you see a Slate React components. All that is, if you've done a lot of React, that's a context provider that just provides the Slate editor to everything below it in the in the React tree, which is really handy actually, because it means things like toolbars can always just grab a hold of the editor from the context and do whatever they want, like make some stuff bold or italic, that kind of thing. And then it's an editable component, and that's the actual editor on the screen. That's like the text area, if you want to think about it like that. And that's the whole thing. So the on change fires every time the user types something, just like it would in a input or text area, and it updates that document for you. And that's it. That's the hello world of Slates. 12 lines or something like that. But that's pretty boring. I've done in 12 lines what you could do in 2 if you used text area. So how do we make it interesting? Slate basically has 3 ways to extend the behavior. It's got plugins, like any good framework. It has plugins that customize the behavior of the thing. You can handle kind of low-level events. You can handle focuses and blurs and key presses and all those things you would expect in an input. And you can tell it how to render stuff. You can tell it, with the thing on the hello world example here, it's just going to be a div with some black text in a white box. It's not going to be very interesting to look at. But you can provide your own custom rendering to tell it to make it look a little more interesting. And here's the kind of spoiler. Having built this editor over the past year or so, like 80% of what you do when building an editor like this is look for strings to match. And if you find the strings to match, do something, right? Replace some text or delete some text or add some new blocks or whatever. But you mostly match strings. You look for like colon, name of emoji, colon, and replace it with the emoji, or you look for pound sign and a space and then turn it into a headline. Like string matching is 80% of the job. What do plugins do in Slate? They're super simple. All they do is they take some built-in behavior of the editor and they override it with your own custom behavior. There's like 10 or something methods maybe that you can override. I picked the 5 that we actually use the most in Kitemaker here. But it's things like there's an insert text function that gets called every single time a user types some text into the editor. So what you can do is hook into that, listen for the text being inserted, and then do something smart or interesting based on the text that's inserted. And all you do, you can see like this, the convention for these plugins is to name them with something, like start the function name with, but there's really nothing special. It's just a plain old function. It gets an editor in, it overrides some stuff on that object, and it returns the editor back out, and that's it. So you can kind of say, like, every time text is inserted, I want to check for this particular string and do something. Or there's one called insert data, and that's like if the user pastes something or drags an image onto the editor, for example. This is also where you tell it, like we had that inline link a few slides back. This is where you tell it what elements in Slate are inline. And also where you tell it what elements are what is known as void. That's things like images and stuff that doesn't have any text in it at all, actually. So the cool thing about this is it's pretty simple, the concept, like just override functionality and then pass the editor along. And what that means is you can chain these together. You can wrap it over and over again with these plugins and compose fairly sophisticated behavior from very simple building blocks. So you would write like a plugin to handle markdown shortcuts, for example, and that's all it will do. And you'll take another plugin and you'll handle image dropping, for example. And you just keep building these little things which you can reason about reasonably well because they're small, and you compose them together into a really complex editor. Slate's got a lot of APIs. I'm not going to go into it at all for like how you manipulate the documents. You can do everything you can imagine, like inserting text, deleting text, highlighting stuff, adding new blocks, deleting blocks, splitting blocks, anything you can imagine that you'd want to do to a document, you can do. And you can use that in these plugins. And the other important thing is plugins don't care about rendering at all. They're just manipulating that JSON blob we looked at in the beginning. This is cool because then it doesn't tell me what my images or my headlines have to look like. We can share code together. I can give you a plugin that recognizes Markdown, and you can decide how should that Markdown be styled on the screen. So it's pretty cool, pretty powerful, really simple. We also do a lot of event handling, especially on key down is like the #1 thing you handle when you have to handle events in Slate. In this particular example, I'm just looking as the meta key down. That's the command key on Mac. And is B being pressed? If so, let's not type a B. Let's prevent the default and let's add a mark to tell the Slate this should be bold instead. And we do like 20 of these key down handlers maybe in Kitemaker. And the most common cases are things like this, like hotkeys, or the typical stuff you think about when you're using a good editor, like when you are in a list and you hit tab, the list should indent one level deeper, right? Or if you are in a headline and you put the cursor right in the middle of the text and you hit enter, the half of it stays on one line, half of it goes to the next line, but the next line becomes just a plain paragraph. It doesn't look like a headline anymore. So these kind of things that maybe you haven't thought about that much if you haven't built an editor, but if you just go to Google Docs or whatever, you'll see all these kind of behaviors. And those are very often based on when does the user press enter, or when does the user press delete, or when does the user press tab. So it's a lot of just handle these keys and call one of Slate's many APIs to do the right thing. And last but not least, it's about how do you render this stuff. Slate, like I said, is built with React in mind from the beginning, and it doesn't care about any of that stuff that was in the document, but you care about it when you're rendering stuff. So basically all it does is take that JSON structure and recursively, I was going to say recursively go down, but I think it actually it goes up the tree, rendering these nodes, and it just passes it to this render element function that I've shown here, and you just do whatever you want. So in this case, I'm saying if a code element, if there's a code block in our document, let's render that as a pre tag. Otherwise, let's render it as a div. Of course, in Kitemaker, which has a pretty rich editor, there's probably 20 or 30 React elements in this switch statement, but it is actually this simple. You just decide, okay, if it's an image, in my document and it has a URL attribute on it, I'm going to render an image tag, and I'm going to set the URL equal to the URL in my document. The only gotcha here is you have to remember to take that attributes element that you see, and you have to spread it on the topmost element of your custom components. That's because Slate uses that for its own bookkeeping. It's doing that job that I talked about before of linking the DOM to this data structure that you've built, and it needs to keep track of a bunch of stuff. So if you forget that attributes, you'll have just a nightmare debugging it, because nothing will make sense. All of a sudden, things will just disappear when you're pressing keys, and nothing will make any sense. So just always remember to spread it. I think Slate warns you if you screw it up as well. But that's how you do the custom stuff. Here's a really simple example of what writing a plugin can look like in Slate. Like I said, things start with by convention. So this is just a thing that's going to look for the user typing backtick, and turn it into a code block for us. So we're overriding the insert text function because we want to see when the user has inserted some text. That's what's happening in #2. In #3, we just grab the text at the current selection, like wherever the cursor is. You don't have to go and look at the details of Slate's APIs, but it's we're just grabbing the current text. We're checking, is it backtick in #4. In #5, we are deleting the 3 backticks if it is in fact 3 backticks, and we're setting it to be a code block in #6. So you just write these things over and over and over again, very similar to this, looking for the different things you're looking for. And of course, you build abstractions for matching these strings and all those things. But it is really simple. It is like just basically this kind of string matching 80% of the time. And you just write a bunch of these things and wrap them all together. Some stuff is hard. Those kind of things that I just showed right there is easy, but some stuff is hard. Copy and paste on the web sucks. It's terrible. So you highlight some text from a different document system and you hit copy, and a bunch of HTML ends up in the clipboard. And then you hit paste into your editor, and you have to somehow turn that into something sensible. Some editors like Notion put really beautiful HTML into the clipboard, and they put the text formatted as Markdown, and it's great. And other tools like Google Docs just put complete nightmare crap into the clipboard, and you have to deal with it. So what we did is we just made the same document in like 5 or 6 popular editors: Google Docs, Notion, Dropbox Paper, Quip, whatever, the same exact formatted document, and we just paste it into, or have a test that pastes it into our editor and tries our best to make it work. It's hard to get it perfect, but we've got it pretty good, but it's a lot of work actually. Some days I wish we just treated everything like plain text and just dealt with the fact that the formatting is lost, because it would be way easier. Like I said, out of the box, Slate doesn't know anything about even undo or redo. It does come with a plugin that you can use that does very basic undo and redo, but it's not very smart. So we've had to spend quite a bit of time making undo and redo smarter. So like when you do one of these shortcuts, typing 3 backticks and turning it into a code block, if you hit undo, it just removes the code block part, but all the text is still there. Getting those things to be kind of atomic and work the way the user would expect was a bit of work. We're actually going to open source that plugin because it's pretty handy. There's a lot of stuff that hovers over our text in Kitemaker. Like you type that / menu, for example, and it pops up with all the things you can insert. Getting those things positioned correctly over the text is a bit of a trick. Sometimes you have to worry about the native selection in the browser and things like that. It's not a joy. Yeah, sometimes the editor steals keystrokes that you meant for other things. Like I said, we loaded up Kitemaker with hotkeys. Like you can use hotkeys for everything. You never have to use the mouse if you don't want to. We like Superhuman a lot, the email clients, and we stole some inspiration from there. But occasionally the editor and the hotkeys want to fight over who gets the key events, and that can be tricky to deal with. And we've had some. There are some problems in Slate with native input methods, like the MacBook Pro touch bar. And I've also been told by some of our users some devices for writing Japanese apparently fights with our editor a bit. And this has been fixed in some PR in Slate, but not merged, and it's been there for like 6 months. So there are some rough edges, I would say. Right. So before you go out and grab Slate as your editor of choice, I would give a bit of a warning. The first thing is, like, the open source project was going really, really active towards the end of last year. There was a major rewrite. They went from JavaScript to TypeScript. They dropped a dependency on immutable JS and went to just plain JSON as the document format. It got really active, but then it's kind of slowed down. There's a lot of open issues. PRs take a while to close. Issues are not being triaged very quickly. So it could be going better, I think, the actual project. We wish we had more people working with us that we could spend time on the project, but it's not possible at the moment. Also, because of that huge rewrite last year, the documentation is lagging a bit behind reality. So there's some mystery parameters and things when you look at the APIs that you just have to sort of play with a bit and figure out what they do. And also, the latest version of Slate, this rewritten version, doesn't work great on Android, but they actually just had a Kickstarter. Some company in Canada did a Kickstarter for $25,000 to support Android on Slate, and it was actually funded. They were at $14,000 until the last day, and someone pitched in $11,000 by themselves to fund it. So Android support is coming any day now. They actually just started this past week, I think. So if you're really critical, if you don't have a native Android app and you really need it to work great on Android, be a bit wary that it's going to take a few months before that's likely to be true. That was backwards. That's most of what I had to say. I just wanted to say thanks for having me from the cold white north of Norway. And if you're interested in Slate, if it seems cool to you, we're going to write a series of blog posts about it, getting to way more detail than I was able to go into here tonight. So either follow me on Twitter or check out our blog at the bottom there and follow it. We're going to do a whole series of some of these hairier subjects like copying and pasting and some of the more difficult things, and also open source a bunch of our stuff. And then one plea as a new startup co-founder is if you've got a minute, go to kitemaker.co and check out Kitemaker. We think it's pretty great, and it's getting better all the time, especially if your team is working remote. We're really focusing on making things great for remote teams these days. So it takes like 2 seconds to sign up. So go give it a whirl and let us know what you think. We've got intercom down in the bottom right corner and a feedback form if you just hit Command K and say send feedback. And we're pretty quick to respond, and we're pretty quick to take in features if we think if your requests are reasonable as well. So check it out.
Cool. Well, this would be the time where we applaud. So
virtual applause.
So much I know that it's very late for you.
I know. We're
open the floor to questions. One thing that I have is I actually was working on a project recently, and I evaluated Slate, but actually moved to Quill instead.
Yep.
Is there any reason that you found Slate to be better than, let's say, Quill or Draft or something?
Not really. I was kind of hooked on Slate early because the landing page, the guy Ian Storm Taylor, who wrote it originally, I think he's one of the founders of Segment actually. He wrote his kind of philosophy for why he built it in the first place, and his philosophy just kind of clicked with me. And it was really about this like super unopinionated about everything way, and trying to make it as like lean and mean as possible. And that kind of clicked for us. And so we tried it first, and we actually very early on had a collaborative editing prototype going, and it worked really well for that because it had these sort of primitives, and it worked. So we didn't really look much further. We played around with Quill and with Draft, and we looked at tricks when Basecamp released it, but it was very opinionated. And so we just sort of we stuck with what worked, basically. It was not deep analysis, I would say. It's just at some point you've put too much work into it to go anywhere else, I guess.
You already have a free plan for Kitemaker, but I was going to say, is there something I can do to bend your arm to maybe give people a free trial or something? But I think you've already included that. Yeah,
it's free. So what we do is unlimited users up to 250 issues, and we don't count the issues you import from any other tool against your quota. So if you go in and you import your Trello issues, for example, or your GitHub issues, we don't count that against your 250. But if people try it out and they're still unsure and they've gone over the 250, just ping me and we'll extend your trial. And we'll want to talk to you about why you're unsure, but we'll happily give you a little more time to make sure you're getting the value that you need out of it.
Cool. We'll open the floor. Anyone have any questions? Anything that they want to know more about? I can't stress enough how really awesome this presentation has been, because Slate, it's awesome, it's super powerful, but it also is no joke. So you gave a lot of warnings, which I think are also helpful.
Yeah, we have some scars. So we're actually, we're still recovering from the rewrite when they changed everything around. Like, it really changed a lot at the end of last year. All the APIs changed. He just kind of brain dumped everything he thought he screwed up on the first version, and opened it up to the community and came up with disappeared for like 6 months and came back with a fully rewritten version. And we were kind of both shocked and happy because the new version's awesome, but it was a lot of work. And we still have some things on the legacy old version we're working on. So
beautiful. Maybe another minute or two if anyone has a question.
And I'll post some links and stuff as well for helpful stuff for Slate for everybody.
So you mentioned that you were releasing the blog posts in the coming months. Does that also include the open source stuff? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I don't think I was very clear. We'll try to open source what we can. Things like things we've done to make history work the way we want, and those things that we'll definitely open source. We're we're a pretty transparent company, and we don't think we have a lot of intellectual property in our editor. So that's not an issue. The only question is like how much time can we spend making other pieces of it reusable, like things like Markdown and those kind of things we should be able to do no problem. But like our Figma integration, for example, that's quite tied to the fact that a Kitemaker user has authenticated against Figma and blah, blah, blah. So there's pieces we won't be able to do. Also, there is one piece that I pointed out that plugins don't care about rendering at all, and that key handling, like pressing keys, is separate from plugins. And that makes sharing things open source actually a little bit tricky, because we could release our Markdown plugin, for example, that knows like when you type a star and then hit space that you're building a bulleted list, or when you hit 1 and then dot and then space, you're building a numeric list. But the problem is it's not easy to pair that together with the key handlers that know how to split lists up and how to indent lists and unindent lists and all those things. So we need to think a little bit about how we do that. And of course, we're a tiny new startup, so we need to also balance that with our other work. But I will try at least to say that the things we talk about in the blog post should be open sourced.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I just want to give an opportunity, again, being a new startup and all that. If you guys are playing with issue trackers, I have not used Kitemaker yet, but I intend to at least give it a shot. I'm coming from Trello right now for one project. So,
we have an importer for Trello and for GitHub issues that pulls in everything. So it gets all of your history, all of your assignees, labels, comments, attachments, all those things get sucked into Kitemaker from Trello, and same for GitHub issues. And the Jira one is in progress, but Jira is a beast to integrate to, so it's a bit more work.
What about GitLab issues? Someone's asking.
GitLab issues is also on the pipeline. We were just waiting for the first company that sort of says we would use Kitemaker, except you don't support importing from GitLab issues. We haven't found that company yet. So if you're that guy, then we can make GitLab issues. We can make that happen.
How's the I don't want to be too specific, but how's the overall response been, and getting people to use it? I feel like you probably, I don't want to say benefited, but COVID probably has pushed this sort of work to the forefront of people.
It has, and we did benefit in some ways from COVID. Like we had teams coming to us who were going from Post-it notes on the wall, and you can't do Post-it notes on the wall when you can't go to work. And that's
my screen.
Yeah, and so we did in some way benefit. It's tricky, like the cycle on these things. The way it usually works is someone tries it. If they like it, they take it to their team. The team will try it out, and if they like it, then they finally have to take it to someone who will pay for it, basically, in the company. So that's the kind of cycle we're working on, and we fail at each step. Like we drop people at each step along the way, but we're pretty happy. Like we're finding, because the editor, for one thing, is really good. Like we have, for example, you could put math expressions in there, like LaTeX math expressions, and so teams doing ML have been picking it up and putting their math in the issues. And we're now thinking a lot about how do remote teams work, and particularly how do asynchronous remote teams work, like where people can't take a Zoom meeting every 5 minutes to discuss something. How can we make it really killer for those teams? So that's where we're spending all of our effort right now, basically, is thinking about those teams that maybe aren't online at exactly the same time, or where a developer just wants to put his head down for 3 hours or her head down for 3 hours and not get interrupted. How can we make this sort of optimal for these teams, and where managers can't sort of flutter by the desk and ask how things are going, and these kind of situations? How can we make it really great for these teams? So that's where we're spending a lot of our time, and there's no shortage of teams who work like that now, either by choice or by COVID. So,
well, thanks so much, Kevin.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You to stick around. I don't expect you to, given that you should probably get back to bed.